BBC Media Action was started 15 years ago as the international media support, media development charity set up by the BBC. It was originally started because the BBC kept on being asked to do training of journalists around the world, internationally, but there was also quite a strong kind of demand for the BBC's educational work as well. That cover everything from health issues to environment issues and various other things. So, but now it's quite expanded to a substantial organisation. So we work in 26 countries around the world. Most of those countries are quite fragile states or threatened democracies. They're mostly resource-poor countries. And a lot of the work is around supporting democracy, democratic debate, independent journalism.
Communication. We all depend on information and ideas we can trust to steer our lives. BBC Media Action reaches more than 200 million people around the world, and our local teams work with over 100 committed media partners, and together, through creative communication, we build a freer, fairer and safer world.
We have about 100 media partners across those 26 countries. And with those media partners, some of those are online platforms, some of them are state or public service broadcasters, some are commercial broadcasters. We reach about 200 million people with and in partnership with those organisations. The vast majority of that reach and that scale is achieved by partnerships with domestic, national or local media. It was about supporting democracy and issues like accountability. And political participation and voice. And I think increasingly that has shifted over to becoming much more about social cohesion and how do you enable the debate and the dialogue and the conversation across divides in society. So the media landscape, at that time there was a huge amount of optimism about what new technologies would bring and about what liberalisation, which was very much happening at the time, or broadcasting and other media would happen, and we were surfing a democratic wave. And now of course we are trying to survive a crisis of closing public spaces, massive assaults on the media, but also these fundamental issues of increasing filter bubbles, echo chambers, a kind of separation of politics. So we're having much, and this is what we've been tracking quite significantly over the recent years, is this kind of increasingly fragmented media leading to increasingly fractured and polarized politics. And I think one of the key things an organisation linked to the BBC can do is to try and meet the market failure. There's no market incentive to really try and enable that conversation, that dialogue across divides. Most media is interested in serving specific constituencies in society, and of course that's exacerbated by social media patterns as well. So that's a big change, I think, from accountability to a kind of social cohesion, to some extent conflict prevention agenda too. So it's funded entirely by donors, so it's not funded except quite a small amount by the BBC, so our total income is about £32 million, what's that, 45 million euros, something like that. And that comes from everyone from United Nations organisations like the United Nations Development Programme, through to the Gates Foundation, through to the Department for International Development in the UK and various other bilateral agencies. So they support the work. We maintain our editorial independence in everything that we do. The biggest grant or investment we've had in the organisation came from a UK Department for International Development. It finished about a little over a year ago. That was a £90 million investment over 5 years, so £18 million a year, something like that, and about half of that went into this kind of accountability programming. And how we measured it was, well, we did huge research around it. So we did baseline studies to find out what people what they thought of their politicians, but also what they thought of the existing role of media in holding them to account. Measures on the field, so nationally represented surveys, quantitative data, backed up by a whole lot of qualitative data, focus group discussions, in-depth interviews, other techniques as well. We have to be really good at demonstrating the impact of our work. So we tend to go beyond the usual kind of measurement of reach to actually, does this make any real difference in the world? Does the media we're supporting, is it effective at holding government to account? Is it actually leading to a more informed public and an informed society? Is it capable of enabling kind of debate and conversation across divides in society and breaking down echo chambers? All these issues we measure, and that's my job. I'm the Director of Policy and Research, and we have a network of about 60 or 70 researchers across the organisation focused on fundamentally trying to understand what people want to talk about, but also is what we are doing and what the partners we're supporting, is it actually translating into something that's actually useful for them? Journalism has to be constructive. I think people and the BBC, and to some extent us, have been actually pioneering in many respects, or certainly adopting this solutions journalism. So we understand that people are so tired of hearing, all the things, the problems in the world, and the challenges over which they don't feel they have power, they don't have agency. What do they actually do about something? And so there's absolutely a role for journalism to be pointing people, to be highlighting that there are solutions to many of the issues that humanity is confronting. There are things that people can do about things. And actually a lot of the work BBC Media Action does is about what we call efficacy or agency, but actually it's giving people the feeling that they can actually take the future into their own hands. If they do participate in politics, if they do engage in society and debate, there are things that they can do to actually address the issues around them and shape the world. And unless we provide some sense that that's possible, I think it's just a recipe for, well, ultimately for, I think, potentially for extremism or simply people switching off from politics altogether, and I think that would be a disaster. We have a colleague, Joseph Warungu, who was hosting some of our programs in Kenya around the election before last in Kenya. And he coined this term, the peace lobotomy, because sometimes peace journalism just stops people asking difficult questions or airing the issues that people are really angry about. And you cannot have peace unless people feel that they are voicing the concerns that they have in their society. So peace journalism is not a term I actually like. I think it can lead to a confining and constraining of democratic debate. And ultimately, I think it can act as a kind of pressure cooker where ultimately conflict might become more likely in the end. There is a kind of common agreement that there is this collapse of trust in journalism and in institutions, which indeed, to a substantial extent, there is. I am struck that there's lots of new initiatives, this actually mushrooming of hundreds of initiatives trying to address issues of misinformation and challenge. I'm slightly puzzled why people aren't looking a bit more about, okay, where does trust in media still exist, and where is it still maintained? And actually, it's quite significantly strong in public service media. The BBC, domestically in the UK, still commands very high trust levels. I mean, it's not as high as it perhaps was and it would like, but it's way higher than other forms of media. And indeed, internationally, the World Service, BBC World Service continues to be very trusted. So I think it's actually quite striking that people aren't perhaps looking at that as saying, well, okay, what is it about traditional, boring public service media that is commanding trust? And I think actually one of the issues that it's not boring. I think it is, fundamentally at the heart of what we do and what the BBC does is, is on each of our identity cards. We've got audiences who are at the heart of everything that we do. And so fundamentally, if you're not paying attention to what people want to talk about, you're going to fail. But also, if you're not, we're one of a few institutions that doesn't tell people, I think, what to think. And vast majority of media now exists to try and tell people what to think.
Nearly 3 years ago, Donald Trump came to office and he promised peace and prosperity for America. And this he has delivered.
Our job is to inform and engage, but also equip people to work out what they want to think, to make their own decisions and take their own decisions on the issues that affect their lives. It went through quite a significant contraction around 2010 when, after the economic crisis, the UK government stopped funding the BBC and World Service, and the BBC World Service was folded into being funded from a domestic license fee, so from license fee payers in the UK. And as a result of that, there was quite a big contraction at the time. It was quite a significant number there was various language services closed, for example, and also domestically there were a lot of savings as well on the BBC. But having said that, just in the last couple of years, the government has started to recognise the degree of the information crisis in the world and has substantially increased its funding from government to the World Service. The domestic BBC continues to be paid entirely through the domestic licence fee, so not by government. I think we are going to return to a time in such a messy, fragmented information and communication space where no one knows what to trust. I think it's going to become increasingly important to have brands and like BBC, but others as well. People are going to need to work out who they're going to invest their trust in when there'll be potential for being played and lied to is so prevalent. So I do think the future, actually, I personally think that kind of organisations like the BBC and the same in other countries is more important than it's ever been. The BBC domestically invented the iPlayer, which was really the first proper online catch-up platform, and that was, when I was working at the time, and I thought that's really remarkable. So I think they've actually continued to be a pioneer in some ways in terms of digital platforms. I think the massive challenge now is continuing to engage young people. I mean, this is the biggest concern I think for all public service broadcasters. Is I think there is a big challenge in terms of how to engage young people, not just through digital platforms, but on the social media platforms. And I think there's huge new challenges of kind of closed information ecosystems. We're seeing it all over the world, in everywhere from Brazil to many other places, of WhatsApp groups and other forms and kind of media that's effectively behind paywalls. So I think we've got increasing challenges of actually when public conversation is basically hidden from view from anyone, you just don't know what's happening in it, I think is a huge concern for public service broadcasters. So it's not as if the challenges are becoming bigger and bigger, and my big concern is that misinformation and disinformation is winning at the moment. So I think we really do have to step up our game as an organisation. I think the BBC knows that it has to as well. But I also think as a community, I think we need to really link up with all the people who are trying to protect the democratic information and communication space and really work out much more, with much more energy and much more determination, how do we defend democratic politics in the 21st century and informed society in the 21st century.